here. Thank you so much for contributing to what we're looking forward to with this election. We have seen so much in the last 18 months, haven't we? So much that I think none of us ever could have imagined would happen. When it comes to the war on terror, I think none of us could have imagined that we would see domestic attacks here on U.S. soil. Whether it was the recruiter station down in Arkansas, or whether it was the Fort Hood disaster, where an individual who was a terrorist who on his business card had the words "Soldier of Allah" on his business card, and now we're not supposed to use the word terrorist anymore? That's not the way going forward. That's not what we're going to be doing. And then, of course, there was the infamous underwear bomber on Christmas Day. Remember that? That was a tremendous tragedy averted. And it was Christmas Day, and the underwear bomber, once he was taken off of the plane, after less than 50 minutes of interrogation, we saw something like we just couldn't believe. Here he was given the rights, privileges, and immunities of a United States citizen, despite the fact that he was a foreign-born terrorist who had worked with a radical cleric and had worked with Al-Qaeda in the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. This was unbelievable. Do you realize that the FBI wasn't consulted? The CIA wasn't consulted. Homeland Security wasn't consulted. Counterterrorism wasn't consulted. Even the triage unit, HIG, created just for this purpose, wasn't consulted. Who was consulted? He was given the rights of an American citizen. Who was consulted? Eric Holder, our Attorney General, was consulted. And this was the conclusion that they came up with. Their conclusion was to give him the right to remain silent and a tax paid at your expense attorney and told to be quiet, and he was. Shameful, absolutely shameful. And this week, what have we seen come out of the White House? This week alone, we've seen, just a matter of fact today, that the President has said we won't be using the word Islamic terrorist anymore in our United States national security strategy. Well, it's note to self. You might change the terminology, but you can't change the reality. And before all else, it is the security of the American people that we hold dear. And we will continue to stand strong against the forces of terrorism. And then earlier this week, we found out that the President said that he was going to change the United States strategy on dealing with nuclear weaponry. Did this shock anyone? So if, in fact, there is a nation who is compliant with all the rules ahead of time, and they complied with the United Nations on nuclear proliferation, if they fire against the United States a biological weapon, a chemical weapon, or maybe a cyber attack, well then we aren't going to be firing back with nuclear weapons. Doesn't that make us all feel safe? It's time for a new beginning in the United States of America when it comes to our safety. And we're going to get there. Because of you. We're going to get there. Is it that wasn't enough? In the last 18 months, we have seen nothing less than an economic coup transpired before our eyes. Just think, 18 months ago, prior to the bailout of all the banks, the $700 billion bailout, of which I was a no vote, by the way. And they say Minnesota's not conservative. Prior to that, 100% of the private economy was private, as it should be. consider what's happened. The federal government has purchased some of the largest banks in the United States. They purchased the largest insurance company in the United States, AIG. Your federal government has purchased Freddie and Fannie, the secondary mortgage companies. Do you know now the federal government owns over 50% of all home mortgages in the United States? We also own GM and Chrysler. Did you ever think that you'd live to see the day when it's government motors? And then, unfortunately, we saw something else. We saw the federal government completely take over the student loan industry and now the healthcare industry with Obamacare. Well, we're not going to take this one lying down. If you add all of that together, that's 51% of the private economy in 18 months is now either directly owned or controlled by the federal government. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable. It is stunning. And so that's what we're going to do come November. We're going to slowly unwind this process. We're going to get the federal government out of private industry. I think I heard someone say repeal. You better believe it, baby. Repeal is what this girl is going to be all about after November. As a matter of fact, tonight that we took that infamous monstrosity of a vote to nationalize effectively health care in the United States of America, I turned to one of my colleagues on the floor and I said, this is it. We have got to file a repeal bill. And he said, go for it. And so the next morning, I was the first member of Congress on the floor to slap down a bill to repeal Obamacare. The bill number is 4903. Go to MicheleBachmann.com, click onto the petition to repeal Obamacare, and maybe when you're there, you might want to maybe donate some money or something. That might be a great idea. We got the thing called an election coming up. But we are going to repeal, and my hope is that every member of Congress will file a similar bill to repeal Obamacare. Already, Steve King of Iowa, Parker Griffith of Alabama, we've already been starting to file repeal bills of Obamacare. And we're about repealing all of Obamacare and all of the Obama agenda this fall. Because we're going to start by starving the beast. That's what we're going to do. When we finally have a change election, and when, as we were told by this administration with this high unemployment, now upwards of 10%, that that's the new normal. Is that the new normal?